Push this. Hi, I'm Dr. Arlen Myers. I'm the president and CEO of the Society of Physician Entrepreneurs, and thanks for joining us at SoPE School. This course is on healthcare artificial intelligence entrepreneurship. And I just want to go over a couple of things, a sort of homework, or just a couple housekeeping things. I published some things in the chat if you don't see them, but basically, the reason that this faculty, and I just want to thank everybody who has put in a lot of work and effort in kind of developing and delivering this. We're trying to address the need for artificial intelligence in healthcare creation from the entrepreneurship perspective. We've heard a lot about use cases, end use, how to do it, what works, what doesn't, et cetera, all the issues with ethics and responsible use and bias, et cetera. But we thought that there was a gap in teaching, or at least sharing experiences about how do you actually create this stuff and all of the issues that you have to deal with to successfully deploy it such that it's meaningful and it's effective. So that's what this is about. The course is structured on Canvas. For those of you who are not familiar, Canvas is a learning management system that's pretty well recognized around the world. So you should have received an invitation to get on Canvas to see the syllabus, to see what the course is about, it'll describe the learning objectives, who the faculty are, et cetera, et cetera. And the intent is to deliver this course, and it's relatively cheap. And really, we wanted to address international students, first year, second year medical students, residents, anyone that it's not included in their traditional curriculum. So that's the basic idea. So thank you very much for attending. What we're going to do is the way this is structured, this is intended to really be a conversation and to address your needs. It's not 8 hours of talking head PowerPoint. I'm going to, and each faculty person has been assigned one of the modules. Actually, they volunteered for them. And so if you go onto the syllabus, you'll see what the modules are about, and I've listed them on social media. And I believe, Benny, you're up for the next one in October, correct? So maybe you could just say hi and let folks know who you are and what you'll be talking about next month.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Myers. Hi, everyone. Grateful to be on this call with you. Really excited to share in the discussion. My goal is to help foster a really good understanding of the AI ethics and risk management side of development in healthcare. We'll be touching a bit on AI law, but as you know, it's a bit slow in the United States. So we'll talk about what are the trends in Europe, what are they talking about in the administration and Congress. There's a lot of buzz, but as it relates to healthcare, there's a lot of law that has already been designated in terms of healthcare policy that we'll touch upon as well. I'm excited to be on this call with you. I'll touch a little bit upon the research that we're doing when it comes to AI responsibility. And then to Dr. Myers' point, making sure that we're talking about how to develop this healthcare AI or any business model that you may have in mind through either the Small Business Development Center, through NIH grants, or how we think about mitigating potential challenges in the application of health AI in your specific areas. Thank you.
Great. And maybe you could just let folks know where you are and what your role is there.
Sure. So I'm a health AI business startup entrepreneur myself. I'm a U.S. Air Force veteran of 12 years. Also was a clinician as a surgical first assistant for 12 years, then came to the dark side of medicine and worked my way up the corporate chain in medical device sales and also digital health development. And so right now I'm actually redefining my career in AI by developing a health AI for caregivers on the home care side that supports caregivers of elderly patients with cognitive decline, mild dementia, early Alzheimer's. In addition to doing consulting for other health AI companies, to Dr. Chase's point, one of them is in sleep. They have a health AI tool that helps to cure insomnia through cognitive behavioral therapy as a virtual assistant.
Okay, great. So I think what I'm going to do is the next thing is I'm just going to share my screen and go through some basics of what we're going to talk about and sort of lay the landscape for ensuing presentations. So I thought I would do is give you some comments about the foundations of what I call sick care, AI entrepreneurship. I think you've heard me use this term before, and basically sick care is a description of reality in my world and in yours, because the US healthcare system, at least the US healthcare system and most systems, are not health care systems. They are sick care systems. And in many respects, a lot of people don't think they're either sick caring or health caring systems, because a lot of things have changed. But anyway, the point is, the United States, we spend 4 point something billion and growing. It's estimated the spend is going to go up about 5 to 6% a year in the next 5 years. So we're at about $4.6 trillion in the US sick care spend. And the basic idea behind a lot of what we're discussing is how do we transition sick care to healthcare, given all the issues. So anyway, having said that, let's start off with what is AI entrepreneurship. And there's a lot of conversation about augmented intelligence, assisted intelligence, artificial intelligence, et cetera, et cetera. I don't necessarily want to get into the weeds in that, but the basic idea, I think most people now are saying that using artificial intelligence, or basically computers acting like people making decisions, is really more assistive or augmented. It's not. There are some instances where the AI is actually independent and deployed of a person and is not overseen by a person. But I think the predominant wisdom now is, in medicine at least, it's assistive, and it's designed to help healthcare professionals make decisions. And incidentally, if you're on this call, before I forget, and you want to ask a question, just put it in the chat and we'll get to it when you ask it. So and then secondly, the definition of entrepreneurship varies depending on who you talk to. The traditional notion and the conventional wisdom and the social lore is entrepreneurship is about creating a company, and the bigger the better, and the more money you raise and the more money you make, the better. That's really just one very small part in my mind of entrepreneurship. So the first thing I want to get across to this group is what is my view of entrepreneurship, and how do I think we should define it? And therefore, how do we know when we've accomplished it? So I've divided this into 6 different parts. One is it's the pursuit of opportunity. 2, under volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous conditions. So the main idea is you really don't know what's going to happen, and everything changes so quickly. And this VUCA concept came out of actually war planning. So it was intended to war game what happens in the fog of war. There's this old saying that no battle plan survives the first shot. And I think it's similar in business. It's no business plan survives the first customer. So you really have to sort of be able to think through strategic thinking and strategic planning to deal with these uncertainties. The third is, and I think this is probably the most important part, is the whole point of this is to achieve the goal of creating multiples of stakeholder-defined value to meet the sextuple, what I call the sextuple aims, when compared to competitive offerings of the status quo. And we can get into the definition of value and stakeholder, but the point is that what you think of your idea is relatively meaningless. The only thing that matters is really what the stakeholder or the customer or the patient or the payer or all the different stakeholders in sick care really think about your idea. And ultimately, it comes down to whether they're going to use it or buy it or both. or get somebody else to buy it, like in sick care. So you really need to be focused on the stakeholder, and that's what we're going to be talking about with design thinking in a future module. How do you get into the head of the customer or the stakeholder and figure out what is the problem they want you to solve, and how bad is their problem, and how much are they willing to pay to solve it? Right? So again, it really doesn't make any difference what you think. And there's a lot of process that goes into this to try to sort that out. So the fourth part is you do all this to achieve the goal. You need to design, develop, deploy, and disseminate whatever it is you think you're doing. And typically that has to do with disseminating some sort of innovation. Now, again, the terms AI, entrepreneurship, value, innovation, stakeholders have a lot of different definitions. And the difference between an idea, an invention, an improvement, and an innovation are pretty different. And we can have that conversation about what do I think and others in the group think about, how would you know innovation if you saw it? How would you define it versus improvement, and why does it even make a difference? My impression is that sick care is so broken. There is a role for incrementalism, but the system is so broken that you really sort of have to go big or go home. So it does require innovation, and there's some issues with doing that. And then the last two are, you do all this in order to pursue an entrepreneurial pathway. You have to use what I call a vast business model. So vast means valid, automatic, scalable, and time sensitive. In other words, your underlying business model hypotheses are valid. They can be replicated relatively automatically without too much hands-on. In other words, you start working on the business, not in it. It's scalable, so you can go from one customer to 1 million with the requisite input. And it's really not, it's scalable doesn't mean you spend a dollar to get a dollar. It really means you spend a dollar to get $2. So in order to scale it, you really have to reduce the input per unit output. And then it's time sensitive, because in most entrepreneurial endeavors, the meter's running. You only have a certain amount of money, time, people, effort. And pretty soon, if you don't get over the goal line in a certain period of time, you're game over. So there is a definite sense of urgency. And another one of these terms that has a lot of different definitions is a business model. So what is a business model? It's basically how you construct your business to make money. And we can get into all kinds of make a profit. We'll get into some business model canvas ideas later in the course, but that's what a business model ultimately describes. It's essentially, how do you create a scale and harvest value in your business? And then what's the point of all of this? And that is to achieve the sextuple aim. Now, you've heard of the triple aim, the quadruple aim, et cetera, et cetera. I've included, a couple of other things. One is reducing waste and administrivia, because about 25 to 30% of the US sick care spend is wasted. And that's roughly a $1 trillion opportunity, if you think about it, because we're about 4.6 trillion in the spend. And the last one is, and some people may not like this, but the last one is shareholder value. And the reason that people push back on that is to say, wait a minute, we've had enough corporatized medicine and retail medicine and big box medicine. But the reality is, one of the stakeholders, and probably, in a public corporation, a significant stakeholder are the shareholders. So if you're going to create a business or a product or something, you have to be able to satisfy the interests of the shareholders. And we don't think about that a lot in academic medicine or in medicine, because we don't have a lot of shareholders other than patients and the other stakeholders. So anyway, that's so can you see this? Can you see what I just put on here? Someone's saying Your slide is on the first one. So can you see this now on the second slide, what I just said? Yes. Okay, Benny, you're nodding your head. Okay, so let's go to the next. And again, if you have any questions or you want to make any comments, raise your hand and we can address this. So I'll stop just when this slide. Does anyone have any comments or additions or anything they want to add to this? Okay. So so you can see this one, right? You can see this next slide, Benny. Can you see that? Okay. Good. So the next point I want to make is that there's a difference. I mean, entrepreneurship is sort of what I just described, but it can be what I call internal or external. So there's a lot of different ways to satisfy the definition of what I just described. And that is that internal entrepreneurship, otherwise described as intrapreneurship, means that you're getting ideas to internal stakeholders in your organization as an employee. Now, roughly 70–75% of US physicians now work for someone or work for an employer rather than independently owned practices. That's a trend that's been going on for a very long time, and we can get into the discussion. Is that going to continue? Is this going to be pushback? Are people going to quit being employed? Because there's a lot of heartburn that goes into that. And we can have that conversation. But basically, for the sake of this discussion, intrapreneurship means you are an employed someone, could be a health professional, could be any person in your organization, who is trying to act like an entrepreneur using the definition that I just stated within your organization. And the point is to add value to your organization. Just like we said, using a vast business model. And then there's the external ones, which are you're creating something and you're actually selling it or producing it or deploying it or referring it to external stakeholders. And if you look at a 2x2 matrix in terms of inside out, outside in, you could be an intrapreneur, that is someone working in an organization, and you'd like to deploy it in your organization, but that certainly doesn't preclude you from selling it outside your organization through, standard business processes, tech transfer, licensing, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not like the only thing that I'm going to create is going to be used in my hospital. If this thing works, I want to be able to sell it or use it so other people can use it. So if you're an intrapreneur, you could be what I call inside in, where your inside idea stays inside. Or you could be inside out, which means your inside idea can also go outside your organization. And we can talk about how that works and the different business models and all that other stuff. The same is likewise true for external. So if you're a freestanding company and have nothing to do, you have your own company, you're not working for somebody, you're going to sell that to other external stakeholders, which is a typically described B2B or business-to-business business model. Or you want to sell it more commonly, in the case of artificial intelligence, to internal sick care stakeholders, like a hospital. And everybody's trying to push their idea to hospitals and to get the attention of CIOs and various sorts of decision makers and people in the buying group. So there's lots of different ways to skin this cat. And you really sort of have to decide which pathway do you initially want to take? Where do you want to put the stake in the ground? How are you going to win? Where are you going to play? What's your unique selling proposition? All the stuff that goes into how do you actually get the university of whatever to buy your artificial intelligence solution in sick care. So that's an outside in view. And then, as I said, so there's different boxes where you're intentionally trying to play. Any comments or questions about this? Or Benny, do you want to make a comment since you've had some experience with Inside?
Yeah, certainly. I'll give an example. One of the speakers who may join us in the discussion in October is the chair for the NLP committee in the American Association of Health Informatics. and he's
Why don't you,
developed.
why don't you, why don't you define NLP for those people that don't know?
Sure, natural language processing is essentially the science behind ChatGPT around that generated linguistics model that is out there. And so he studies specifically and he tries to find the right way to use GPT fidelically in the healthcare realm. He's developed a number of NLP, natural language processing algorithms at the UPMC area and also for the Mayo Clinic. And to Dr. Meyer's point, they just don't take off. They don't hit the ground running because he hadn't necessarily taken the approach of entrepreneurship to make sure that everyone was bought in and implementing it in the health systems. And so he's learning and starting to disseminate how he takes these algorithms in a meaningful way and takes them and make sure that they're matched to the problem closely to the physicians that would be utilizing them. So I think entrepreneurship in some cases is underscored here because we're constantly trying to find and understand how investors think about this. But at the end of the day, the physicians are the ones who are going to implement this and transform healthcare with it.
So does anybody else want to chime in on this? Because my view is that intrapreneurship actually is more difficult than external entrepreneurship. And the reasons are fundamentally you're fighting a two-front war. One is you have all the issues that you have to deal with to create a product, to sales, marketing, finance, operations, the whole drill. So you have the whole thing of creating a product that will sell just like everybody else does. But on top of that, you now also have to fight the corporate immune system in your organization. And the corporate immune system, whether it's a hospital, an academic medical center, any kind of health service organization, is uniquely designed to stomp you like a grape and resist change. So it's a cultural thing. And you have to be able to overcome the resistance to change within your organization. And that takes a lot of political savvy. There's a whole nother talk about entrepreneurship, but a module, we're going to be talking about this in the next several months. But don't sell yourself short in thinking that this is going to be easy. It's because you're doing it in your own organization and all these other people are, trying to do it. So thanks for your comments. Anybody else want to chime in, Brian, or anybody else want to chime in on their experience with issues concerning intrapreneurship versus external? I can't hear you, Brian.
How about now?
I got you now. Good, thanks.
Okay, sorry, thank you. I corporate immune system is a polite term. I call it the corrupt Roman Senate. People are, kind of below the surface, interested in maintaining the optics of, them being successful in their positions. There's outcome metrics for leaders and the like. And so you tend to get, we talk about data being siloed. You tend to get people kind of siloed. Their shop, say in quality improvement or patient safety, some of the things I experienced. And it's really difficult. They're like a domino to kind of get them tipping and understanding that if you want to work like an organization and be collaborative and participative, that, maybe you need to kind of lower the parapet walls and open the door to the castle and let some other people in and, help you and advance things and maybe be successful together. I guess, Arlen, would be the best way I could couch it. There may be some downrange wins entrepreneurially, that would be more, you and the people around you as an entrepreneur doing cool things. But initially, to kind of win hearts and minds and for people to understand that you're not a threat, I guess would be the best way to say that. You have to your point, do a lot of political maneuvering. And I didn't expect that. You would like to look out and say, wow, we're all working for the same health system or whatever. and people are just, they're going to ride their bicycle until something, slams them from the side and knocks them off of it. And it's difficult sometimes to make that happen and get your ideas across, and why change is necessary, and why money should be spent, and why some of that money should come out of their budget in addition to yours, all that stuff. So you are exactly spot on with your comment that entrepreneurship is perhaps a more difficult row to hoe in some regards. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for your comments. Yeah, so like I said, we're going to have a separate module on this because there's a lot to it. But I think you get the point that they're two separate things. Okay, so hopefully you can see this slide too. So there's a lot that goes into sick care AI entrepreneurship. And many of these topics will be discussed in future modules in this course. But I did want to try to just lay out the landscape of the kinds of things that you're going to have to consider and overcome during your entrepreneurial journey. For some reason or other, I'm not seeing the hands that are being raised. So Maria, thanks for letting me know that. Okay. So Shri, do you have a question or a comment that you want to make?
I just wanted to build on what Benny and Brian just mentioned. It's a little ironic, but sometimes to win the entrepreneurial battle in your institution, especially if it's an academic setting or a university setting, you first have to win the battle in the public court outside, and then you'll surprisingly find a lot more buy-in when you turn inwards into your institution. So I just wanted to add that one point.
Okay. Lawrence, do you have a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to add that with the entrepreneurship, that really the start point is that I've got my idea here. The second point, and a very important point, is that if you are employed by an entity, then you've really got to look at your employment contract and see who actually owns any innovation. I have two examples of clients that I'm working with at the moment, where one client works for a healthcare system and is they are very open to encouraging him and helping him, and for that benefit they will be looking to take a small percentage of any winnings that he has afterwards. And then I have another client on the other end of the scale. They own him. Any intellectual property that he has whilst he's in their employ, that's it, they own it 100%. So it's very important to have that worked out.
Thanks for bringing that up. There are actually several issues that come into play when you are an employee that you don't have to deal with as an employee or as an independent or an outside entity. You've already heard the issues with intellectual property. The other issue that comes up is conflict of interest. So for example, if you are, let's say, a clinician at an academic medical center, and you're an employed doctor, and you come up with something, and you want your idea or your product to be used at your hospital. I mean, it's only natural because you know the people, you know the politics, you got the inside baseball, you can see the problem. Maybe you have a track to the C-suite, whatever. So you knock on the door and you say, hey, I just created this thing, and I think you could get XYZ in terms of achieving the six-tuple aim. How about field testing, piloting, integrating, using, buying my thing? And guess what? they say we can't do that because it could be a potential Stark violation in terms of self-dealing. And not absolutely positively. I've had several experiences with this, and I can tell you that it's an issue. So it's just another part of figuring this out. So intellectual property is an issue, legal issues, pricing, revenue, business model, reimbursement, and reg affairs. Now, the point I want to make about this is a big mistake you can make when you're trying to do this is to work out these problems sequentially instead of concomitantly. And the typical boo-boo or rookie business model is, I'm not going to worry about who's going to pay for this and reimburse me for it until I get approval from the FDA. That's a really bad idea. First of all, the FDA hasn't talked to CMS. They're not coordinated. And secondly, you've gone through months and months and somebody else's money to get this thing developed. And now all of a sudden you're thinking about, gee, who's going to pay for it? That's a really bad idea. So my point is, you got to think of all these things concurrently. You need a reg affairs plan. You need a reimbursement revenue model plan. You need a business model, essentially. You need an IP strategy, et cetera, et cetera. So the take home is think of them all at once. And that's hard because you only have limited bandwidth. You don't have a lot of money. The clock is running. There's a sense of urgency. You typically don't know a whole lot about any of these subjects. So you have to go out and find people to help you. But that's pretty much what you need to do. And then there's a whole other list of things that are going to come across your radar that you have to deal with, many of which we're going to be discussing in this course. Digital therapeutics is a relatively new description of a product category. If you're not familiar with that, go to digital therapeutics. There's a Digital Therapeutics Alliance, dtxalliance.org, and I'll tell you all about what a digital therapeutic is. How are you going to get this thing? How are you going to get people to use it? And this is a major, and we were just talking about a situation where you didn't think through why would someone in your organization use this thing, and what are the ways, what are the barriers, resistance, how do you overcome it? And there's actually a fair amount of literature on this, so it's something that you're going to have to think through in terms of your go-to-market strategy, even if your market is your own hospital, or as I said, as an entrepreneur trying to get this thing over the goal line. And incidentally, there's lots of different, we're not just talking about products and services. So for example, if you're what I call an edupreneur, which means you're trying to create an educational technology product, and you're trying to get folks to use it in your organization. So Maria, you do this. So maybe you can give us some insight into what you've experienced. Go ahead.
So it's a loaded question what you ask. So can you ask again so that we can piece it apart?
Right. Sure. So tell folks, first of all, let's set the stage. So tell folks what you do, who you are and what you do.
So I am a physician by training, and I teach in a master's course and sometimes PhD level course about technology in healthcare education. And my students are, all of them, they are brilliant people. They have their practice set up, their professional life set up. Sometimes they're nurses, most of the time they're doctors, and sometimes we have speech language pathologists, and they come from all over the world. And I teach at MGH Institute of Health Professions at Boston.
Okay.
So,
so you're what I would call an edupreneur. You're an educational technology entrepreneur, correct?
Correct, exactly.
Okay. Right, that's why I'm calling on you. So it's another example of innovation and entrepreneurship is not just about creating $1 trillion company. It's about creating user-defined value, in this case, students. Like, how do you get students to learn better, more, faculty, et cetera, using technologies? So my question is, as an edupreneur,
Mhm.
what have you encountered in terms of actually getting people to use this stuff? Like, how do you get customers, which I assume are faculty or other people there, to actually use it?
So it's I'm going to use the word stakeholder because stakeholder is something that I can relate to, and that would be my fellow faculty, including myself, and also the students. So when we are an educator and we are trying to use technology, so we have to understand the circumstances, but where they are coming from, what do they need? And by every semester, after every semester, there are more people focused. They want to learn more about AI. Couple of years ago, it was not like that. It was just like, okay, there is something called AI. Okay, but that was it. Physicians were like that, nurses were like that, pharmacists were like that, rehabilitative sciences people were like that. But then with the last November, there's a big surge when ChatGPT was released. So now everybody talks about AI and they want to know more. They are doing projects in AI in their hospitals. And I am so curious to see what this semester brings, because several people approached us and say, are you talking about AI in one of the modules? Are you teaching us something about AI in healthcare? So there it is. Pro, what is the word that you said, Dr. Myers?
I'm sorry.
Edupreneur.
Yeah, edupreneur. It's a stupid word that I made up, but I think it sort of describes
Yes.
what I'm talking about. Lawrence, you are a co-faculty member at the University of Colorado School of Business, teaching entrepreneurship to some folks. So what is your response to what I just said? What are the barriers to using educational technologies in these days in sick care?
The short answer to that is, for some, it is a benefit, and for others, the bigger percentage, it's a challenge. My recent experience with somebody who's a neurologist was extolling the virtues of how accurate ChatGPT is. And it's he put in his question, and when he told me the amount of input that he'd put in, it wasn't quite War and Peace, it was close to it. And he got a very simple answer, and it was accurate, he told me. And that was this was about 3 months ago, and that was the first time I'd ever heard of anybody saying that they'd had an accurate outcome to the input of the question. So the biggest danger is that a lot of people aren't familiar enough with the outcomes of ChatGPT, knowing the requirements of the inputs that you have to put in. So the big scenario is garbage in, garbage out, which has been around for a long time. But if you put something in that isn't garbage, you're not going to get garbage out.
Yeah, Sri, you have a comment?
Thanks, Arlen. The only couple of things that I wanted to point out at a very fundamental level in terms of educational technology use is more and more educational offerings are virtual these days. So there's usually a global audience, and not all of them are at the same level of technology savviness. That's one problem. The other thing is that there's learners also at different levels and different ages. So that's also a barrier that I've kind of encountered in any of these courses, especially if they're virtual or online. And the third thing is that there's infrastructure is not uniform too, again, when you have a global audience. So those are some of the barriers that I've kind of come across in terms of educational technology.
Yeah, thanks for your comment. And there's a big difference. Well, there are some differences between creating a course and integrating it into a curriculum, or a curriculum map over 4 years in medical school, versus just using a different technology to teach in an existing course. And part of the reason that we are doing what we are doing right now is we are edupreneurs outside in, because it is so difficult to get medical schools to teach this stuff and change their resistance to it, that we just decided, well, we'll do it ourselves. And so that's why we're doing this. And we're feeding it into whoever wants to watch it. So if you don't, I guess the point is, if you don't do this, someone else is going to do it. If you don't do it within your organization, someone else is going to do it, because if there is a demand for it, and that's a big if. Now, this group, have decided, because we started with a needs analysis that drove identification of the problem and who was interested, who's the customer. And that drives learning objectives in the curriculum. So it's just an example. This course is an example of what we're talking about. And all the issues that we've had to go through to make this work. So thanks again for doing it. So this is like a real world exercise. This is like a group project. And you've encountered the conversations that we've had over the last couple of months. So thank you again for doing it, but I think it's a good exercise in actually application of what we're talking about. Okay, so thanks for your comments. So let's move on. Some other stuff you're going to have to worry about, and which will be included in subsequent modules, will be ethics and responsible use, AI, EHR integration and interoperability. A big one is leadership and change, leaderpreneurship and change management. Now, what does this term leaderpreneurship mean? So basically what it means is the difference between what I call leaderpreneurship and leadership is you are leading entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs. And that's a big difference than leading an organization of non-entrepreneurial mindset people. So it's a different skill set, in my view. And the problem is that a lot of innovation initiatives, you've heard the term innovation theater. There's just a lot of smoke and mirrors, and they call it innovation. It's not innovation. It's, if anything, it's gradual improvement, workflow, process, role assignment, et cetera. It's really not innovation. But the problem is that people manage innovation systems. They don't lead entrepreneurs. And that's a big difference. And if you don't recognize that, you're going to fail, in my view. Well, I don't care whether they do inside or outside. But you have to, I think it's a mindset shift, and it's something that you have to recognize. So that having been said, let me go back, I'm sorry. Then of course, there's the whole issue of money. Now, raising capital, again, is a whole nother deal if you're going outside. But if you're going inside, you're an intrapreneur. And you're trying to not necessarily, in some instances, you are raising capital. You need money inside your organization from someone to launch and deploy and develop your intrapreneurial idea. And that goes much beyond just raising money. You have to raise resources. You need people. You need IT support and time. You need facilities. You need tech support. You need admin. You need a whole bunch of stuff to make this work. And the take-home point that I would give you is you need a sponsor. If you are an intrapreneur, if you don't have a sponsor, now a sponsor means that's not a mentor, that's not a friend, that's not a colleague, that's not a teammate. I'm talking about someone typically above you or the boss, your boss's boss, that will invest in your idea and say, okay, I want you to do this. And I'm going to provide, as your sponsor, 3 things. 1, I'm going to run political cover, because what you're asking me to do is to introduce change in the system, and you're going to get a whole lot of pushback. But I'm going to run cover for you. I'm the dean. I'm going to tell people, don't give this guy or this woman a hard time. I want this to work, directly or indirectly. Number 2, I'm going to give you the resources. I'm going to give you $10,000 to launch this thing. I'm going to give you some admin support from some other place. I'm going to give you time off from your clinical track to do whatever it is you need to do to make this work. That's what I mean. And 3rd, I'm investing in your career development, because I see in you someone who eventually may wind up having my job. If you do not have a sponsor that can fulfill those 3 things, it's a very hard climb. So I would, and again, this takes networking, relationships, street cred, demonstration, pilots. You got to convince the sponsor that you're worth investing in, just like a startup is trying to invest, is trying to raise capital. So you are an entrepreneurial startup trying to raise resources within your organization. And if you don't know how to do that, find somebody who does, or learn how to do it. Otherwise, you'll fail. So let's see. Any other comments about that? Anybody want to say anything about what I just said? Okay. And then you got all these other things, use cases, comparative effectiveness, which is kind of not a lot of people are doing comparative effectiveness research on artificial intelligence. In other words, is this the best, least expensive way to solve this problem? Because AI is expensive and most people can't afford it. And it just what it costs to create it. It's not feasible for most places. And then of course, the whole cybersecurity issues. So again, I just want to bring out this notion of what is a business model, because some people may not be familiar with that. It's basically how a company creates and harvests value. There are lots of different digital health and AI startup business models. And essentially it has to do with, who sells to whom, who buys, who's the customer, are there intermediaries, what's the value chain look like, what is the model you're going to use to basically generate revenue. And the fundamental notion is, if you don't make more money than you spend, you're done. That sounds like a pretty simple explanation, but that's basically what it is. So you got to figure out, how do you make more money than you spend? And that's what the revenue thing is. And a revenue model is part of a business model, just like a cost structure is part of a business model and a whole bunch of other places. But fundamentally, it comes down to 2 parts. What is the model and how much are you charging? So a very simple example is a subscription model. We're seeing a lot of this now. So a subscription model means a magazine or a streaming service. So there's 2 ways you could buy my product. If you're a magazine, you can buy it off the shelf at a newsstand for $7 an issue. Or you can subscribe to it and I'll send you 12 issues once a month for less than $7 an issue. So instead of it being 80 bucks, 79 bucks, it's going to be $50. So that's the subscription model. So the model is you're going to get it on a regular basis, and I'm going to charge you X for each time you get whatever it is I'm selling on a regular basis. And there are whole variations to the theme. So that's something you need to think of as well. And this applies internally or externally. Okay, so some final points. So more specifically, if you're into data analytics, artificial intelligence, et cetera, and I think this applies to almost every entrepreneurial venture and mindset. At first, you want to be a problem seeker, not a problem solver. Too many people are in the weeds creating solutions looking for a problem, and they don't spend the requisite time identifying who's the customer, what is their problem they want you to solve, how bad is the problem, what are the sub-segments or sub-parts of the problem. So somebody wants me to go back a minute. Let me go back. Okay, so what do these things mean? So B is business, C is customer. Sometimes there's an intermediary as the advertiser, the person that's paying for the link between, for example, it's a two-sided market. So it's basically a dating service. Like, for example, Match.com. So you have people looking for dates, people who want dates. You put them on the service, you match the two, and you have advertisers supporting the platform. That's a fairly typical model. So B to C to B is business to customer to business, business to customer, business to business. So hopefully that answers your question, and you can see sort of how all this plays out, but you sort of have to figure out which one you want. And again, there's a lot more in this that we'll get into. So to go back to what I was saying before and to kind of wrap this up a little bit. So you want to be a problem seeker, not a problem solver. And that means you're going to spend most of your time understanding the customer and their problem, not trying to ram your solution down their throat, which we see over and over and over again. And then these are subsequent iterations of scoping so once you've sort of got your teeth on a customer problem, then you start peeling away the onion and you figure out, well, tell me more about your problem. How did you solve this in the past? What are you using now? What do you find as the barriers? What don't you like? What would you like to see happen? Give me a story about the last time you tried this, et cetera, et cetera. And then you're constantly gathering feedback. It's essentially customer discovery plan and lean startup methodology. And then the last part, which I think is probably the biggest barrier, is how do you get people to actually use what you have created? Because bottom line, what people tell you is different than what people do. If somebody says, that's a great idea, would you pay 10 bucks for it? You bet. Guess what? Comes out 10 bucks. I'm not buying it. It's too expensive. So the only way you know someone is actually liking your product is when they buy it or use it. Whatever they say, it's useful. It gives you some insight, but you can't believe it because there's all kinds of reasons why people will blow smoke in your face. They want to be nice to you. Yeah, it sounds like a good idea. I don't have any skin in the game. What difference does it make whether what I say is right or not, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the only way, the bottom line is the dog going to eat the food and pay the price for it? That's the only validation. That's where you want to get. So you really have to understand, why is this person saying no? And if I'm going to leave you with another take home, it's most of the time, it's because they're afraid of something. So the question you want to ask is, would you use my product? Yeah, I think it's really great. Would you pay $15 for it? No. Why? How much would you pay? I'm not gonna pay anything. I mean, these days, everybody gets everything for free. Just go to the internet. I mean, just go to social media. Everybody gets everything for free. And I don't care whether it's a subscription to a magazine or a newsletter or social media stuff or freemium business model, or you call it whatever. Why should I pay for something when I could probably get it for free? And medical education is a perfect example. And this course is an example. Why should I pay for something like this when I can go on Coursera and get a course for free? My answer is because you're listening to this group of people talk about issues directly related to your problem that we solve in real time. That's the value of what we're doing. You can get all this stuff for free. I mean, you don't need us to talk. But most of, if not all the people on this course have been there, done that. So we're giving you the benefit of our experience in landmines. That's, to me, that's the value proposition. So anyway, you have to overcome. So, you know, what are you afraid of? I'm going to pay for something I could have gotten for free. And I don't see the value in doing it. Of course, people don't value what they don't pay for, but that's another story. Okay, so having done that, I want to sort of wrap this thing up because we're running out of time. I want to thank everybody on the course and all the faculty and the students and everybody that I hope you got something out of this. I want to remind you that you need to sign on. You should have received, if you registered for this on the LinkedIn, I mean the Eventbrite invitation, a link or received something. Hannah, who was the course coordinator, should have sent you something to sign into the Canvas platform. So please do that. There's lots of great resources there. The faculty are posting things for you to read before each session so we can discuss them. It's a flipped classroom. And it's not, I hope, you know, an hour of PowerPoint and that's that, you go home. The next one will be on the second Tuesday of October. Benny will be presenting that, as he said, about AI law, respond to the Canvas invitation. And that's that. So any further final comments, questions, notions, whatever? Tim, are you with us? Tim? Yeah, I can't hear you. I want to get a little feedback from the students. Lisa, are you there?
Srikanth has his hand up.
Sri, you want to make a comment?
Thanks, Adler. No, I just wanted you to comment very briefly because you alluded to finding the scope of problem and how to find out what your customers are. So what would be your standard methodologies, for example, for customer discovery and customer creation, if somebody had to do it?
Yeah, there's a lot to that, and there's a lot. So the short answer is there's a process for customer discovery. It's part of the lean startup methodology. And if you and there's a lot of resources and references, how to find someone for an interview, how to approach them, to be honest with you. Once you have them, what questions should you ask? What is the process for validating your underlying hypothesis? And if you haven't read the series by Osterwalder on business model canvas generation, value proposition design, testing your business ideas, those are 3 books that I would suggest you read. This is a fairly complicated question, a lot of process, but the bottom line is there's a way to do this, and there's a very wrong way to do this. So number 1, you have to create an underlying business model hypothesis, which you are going to test, and that you're going to go out and go do an experiment, and you're going to talk to, in some places, they suggest you talk to 100 customers before you start getting valuable, valid, repetitive feedback. And then you either invalidate or validate the underlying hypothesis. And if it's wrong, then you got to change it, go back to the drawing board. But that's how it's done. And that could take, it takes a long time, and it's a skill. But again, if there's a very good article on 50 customer discovery, top 50 customer discovery questions. And there's a process for doing this. So that's what I'd suggest you do. Barry?
Yes, very on point for me. I'm working with the two founders of a company with a medical AI platform, and especially the last slide and the last discussion about pilot study, and where I'm pushing for a study and survey, because they're jumping into the solution before they really understand the problem, and doctors tend to be so treatment oriented. We have to really step back, and so to the comment made last before me, we're running some pilot studies and surveys to really understand, what the market desires out of our AI platform. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the presentations over the next few months. Really on point for me, and I thank you very much for having me.
Sure. I just want to make a final point about that, and that is that when you're trying to do a pilot, find customers, do all this stuff particularly with AI stuff, you're basically dealing with 4 members of a buying group. That is the decision makers that decide whether they want to do whatever you want to do. Pilot, integrate, test, buy, use, whatever. And those people generally fall into 4 categories. Clinicians, that is end user worker bees that are taking care of patients. The finance people and the operations people that generally have to do with the CEO, and the IT people. Now, every one of those, and I include nursing, pharmacy as clinicians, so every one of those has a different need. So they want you to address their need with a value proposition that satisfies them. And the trick of this all is you can't just approach one, you got to get them all to buy in. That's why it's called the buying group. So satisfying clinicians is one thing. Finance is another, operations is another. And the final comment is, what we're seeing is that as artificial intelligence deploys throughout the sick care system, most of the applications are in operations and finance, not clinical improvement. And of the AI solutions, 70% of them are in radiology. So we have a long way to go. And the resistance, and it gets to my question, why don't clinicians use this? I mean, they're interested in it, they want it, because they're afraid. What are they afraid of? They don't know whether it's safe and effective. They don't know whether they're going to get sued. They don't know whether something's going to go wrong if they use it, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to overcome that fear. And that's not something you're going to be able to say, oh, just trust me. I mean, this is going to have to play out before there's, widespread, in my view, dissemination and implementation. So anyway, I hope you found this useful. Our next one, we're looking forward to next month's presentation by Benny. If you have any questions, you guys know how to get in touch with me. I'm happy to sort of steer you in the right direction, because this is a work in progress. I mean, some people can get on, some people can't, but the good news is we were able to get on and Zoom worked. So yay. So have a good day. We'll see you next month. Bye.